Washington's 6th spring practice was a star-studded event.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes for Inside the Huskies of Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. I'm the site editor over with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen today, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and this episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. So, Lars, that was a very interesting spring practice that we got to witness on Saturday afternoon at Husky Stadium. And as we said, there were a lot of star-studded visitors, and I feel like we have to start with the biggest name in the room, and this is all due respect to, some of the visitors that we will be getting to, but John Lynch was San Francisco 49ers general manager. John Lynch was in attendance along with their offensive line coach, Chris Foerster, who they took in practice and then stuck around to watch Roger Rosengarten go through a workout at the very end.
Yeah, I was going to say, it almost kind of seemed like that probably was the plan all along, was it just didn't happen, that they just kind of made that work. But again, it is what it is. But I do think, again, it's kind of one of those, we talked about this a couple weeks on the show, right, where Roger Rosengarten has been training with Joe Staley, a former 49ers offensive tackle. Knows the West Coast pretty well, having been from Colorado. So it's like it's almost a perfect fit. I think it was Mel Kiper that put him in at that first round pick a couple of weeks back, almost about a month ago now. And it just kind of seemed like a natural fit. We'd always kind of said there's no way as a pure talent Roger isn't a first round pick, but where can a team find a need? Can they trade up? Things like that. And so him going down towards the end of the first round of the 49ers would be a perfect fit, both in scheme and just alignment. And I think having them so close to the draft, get one more look. Also, I believe the offensive line coach was there as well, going through the drill. So it wasn't just John Lynch taking a look, being at practice with his kid. Like, they actually had another couple coaches and assistants there to, go through that. I also do believe Zach Henning was helping Roger Rosengarten go through his drills. So, some maybe future assessments going on there as well. But again, that's more of a 3-4 year future investment sort of thing.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I think, again, we've said it from day one, that is a perfect fit for Roger to go to San Francisco. And I think this close to the draft, them taking one more look, like, okay, do we really want this guy? And we're working on our offensive line coach. I think that kind of tells me what they at least have envisioned for him in the end of the first round.
Absolutely. And that's something that's really exciting about that. So obviously we saw him at the end of practice. And then as we started kind of it's me, it's our buddy Nick from Last Word on College Sports, and then Alex and Ben, who write over to Huskies Wire as well. We're all just kind of standing there, and we started putting the puzzle pieces together as we saw Roger Rosengarten walk out. We're like, hold on a second. Wait, this all was the way it all adds up. It was a lot of fun. So we really enjoyed that aspect of it. Jack Del Rio, the former Jaguars head coach, was in attendance again. And we'll get to some of the other visitors, both official and unofficial, but they saw a fantastic practice with Damon Williams, as you mentioned right before we hit record, stealing the show again. But I really we have to start with Denzel Boston and Jeremiah Hunter again, because those guys just, once again, were absolutely outstanding. Denzel Boston had a one-handed touchdown catch towards the beginning of practice, which I know the moss of Ephesians Prysock that he had on Thursday might have been the play of camp, but I don't know. I like the one-handed touchdown just a little bit more, because I just love those one-handed grabs. It's so much fun. And, the more we were saying this to Ben Glassmeyer, once you actually go out there and experience what Denzel Boston has done, where, you and I have been writing about him a lot, and we've just been saying, hey, he's had a fantastic spring, and each and every practice it's Denzel Boston, Denzel Boston, Denzel Boston. And then when people go out there, they just kind of, they open their eyes and say, oh, I understand what you're talking about now. And it was fun just kind of seeing Ben's reaction to all that, and just everybody else in the stands. It felt like that was the biggest reaction, where obviously it's been somewhat lightly attended, but to everybody who's been just in the stands, I heard some reactions from some people that I knew that were there. They all were just, Denzel Boston is becoming that guy. And I feel like we can't understate enough just how big of an impact he has had so far during these first 6 practices.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go to the other side of this, because we're absolutely right, but I'm going to emphasize this from the other side other side of the coin. The look on Ephesians Prysock's face, kind of just his body language, it wasn't, to be very clear, it was not dejected, it wasn't frustrated, it wasn't anything. It was almost a bit of like humbleness, like, okay, I wasn't familiar with your game, but now you're going to raise me, and now watch this. And we saw even John Richardson at times like, hey, stick him. Like, and when a couple of plays later he did, it's like, hey, like, Denzel, you're going to get me a couple times, but I'm going to make sure that who's still got more experience between the two of us. And I think, honestly, both him and Jeremiah, that's going to help them get better as receivers and Ephesians get better as a corner. And so that's when we're talking about, it's not just, Boston victimizing Curly Reed, some freshman, some younger player, or even a walk-on that's like, hey, like, Denzel Boston made this highlight reel catch.
Still progressing, yeah.
Right. And I think, and go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. It's just like, it's just that where it's like, you can mention Curly Reed, Leroy Bryant, some of these guys that are redshirt freshmen that have a really, really high ceiling that you and I have talked about a lot that we really like, but he's doing it against everybody. Like you just said, where it doesn't matter if it's Ephesians Prysock, Elijah Jackson, Devon Banks, Thaddeus Dixon, if it's anybody in that rotation, whoever he goes up against, it just feels like he's going to win the ball every time. And obviously he's not perfect. We did see him fumble on the goal line. Brian Parham, the San Jose State transfer, made a really nice play on that one. And he's not without flaws, as any player isn't. But I really do think that he's been the most impressive player this spring. Jeremiah Hunter is in that discussion as well, but I think Damon Williams has to be number 2.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I think, and the reason, when people ask, hey, why is Jeremiah Hunter running with the 2s? Well, because Damon Williams can't throw to just walk-ons, right? He can't throw to just guys that haven't played. He needs that little bit of understanding and kind of, I don't want to say chemistry, but just experience on the outside to know, hey, if I'm throwing this route, this guy's going to be there. And again, we saw a couple of times he did miss, right? There was a couple, bad throws. Will Rogers obviously had some as well, but Damon, man, that ball comes out of his hand so quick. And it
does.
And I think the one thing that I highlighted to you, obviously, at practice was he can go outside the pocket, but he's not Kyler Murray where he has to roll out just to be able to see over the line and kind of make that work, where he can go deep, he can do all that. He's got the touch to go deep, but I think actually his deep ball zip has gotten better over the course of the first 2 weeks in camp, where the first couple where it was more lofted, kind of similar to Will Rogers, right, where it's got some velocity, but it's more touch than velocity.
But it needs a little bit of air under it to get there, yeah.
Right, and now we're seeing Damon make those over the 25, 30 yards over the middle and even down the sideline where it's, hey, that's coming in with some zip. He's not lofting it in there and trying to hope that he can kind of touch it in there. He's got some conviction with that arm, and I think that's been impressive to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you combine that with just the mobility that you touched on just there, the mobility, that ability to get outside the pocket, where that's another thing where it's hard. Like you can call a player fast. You can say, yeah, no, this guy can really move when he gets up to speed, when he gets going. Damon is another one of those where once you see it in person, it's a very different sort of shock. And so I don't know if shock's the right word, but it's a very different sort of feeling where you just say, oh, now I really understand all the hype around this guy and why he's so impressive, because the more he gets outside of the pocket, the more he just decides to tuck it and run at times, where he's choosing his spots really well to tuck it and go. And the more he does some of those things, the more it just, you can see why I feel he's kind of created a little bit of a gap between himself and DeMarcus Davis for that number 2 quarterback spot as of right now. And Lars, with that being said, we hinted at some recruits. Let's get into who was on campus over the weekend. Right after a message from our good friends over at LinkedIn, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free, because LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role in a given month. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. That's why LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to help make the hiring process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockdowncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockdowncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So, Lars, I feel like the only player we can start with right now is 4-star receiver Raiden Vines-Bright, where he's ranked inside the top 150 players in the nation by On3. He's got a 3-star ranking from 247 Sports, 4-star in their composite ranking, but he is a very coveted receiver. He's got over 20 offers, got a whole lot of official visits set, and he actually moved his official visit up from the end of May to this past weekend here on Montlake to come check out practice, and crystal balls are starting to roll in for his commitment. And this is somebody who you and I have talked about it a lot off the air, that this is a very, very promising receiver with really good speed, good size as well for the speed that he's got, where he looks like he can be a low 4.4, high 4.3 guy, with the right training and just as he continues to progress at the college level. And in a class where you're looking to take 3 receivers, he would be a fantastic starting point for Jedd Fisch, Kevin Cummings, and Washington's entire coaching staff.
Exactly. And to your point, it's not just, this is a 3-star, or this is hey, you kind of none of the other big programs didn't want him. He's got visits set to USC, Florida, Notre Dame. And the fact that he's prioritizing Washington, especially now being an IMG, that speaks a big volume, because again, when you're talking about Washington, they don't really go recruit the state of Florida, right? They don't really go recruit nationally beyond, let's just say, the state of Texas, right? The Midwest is kind of usually the cutoff point. The fact that they're able, now again, he obviously was on the West Coast prior, moved to IMG.
Yep, Arizona kid.
So again, it's not like they're going freshman year to senior year in Florida, but it's still to our point, it kind of makes a difference where, hey, now he's going to be all the way on the other side of the country for an entire year. How are you going to be able to hold on to that commitment? I'm not worried about that, given how well he's prioritized Washington this early on, right? Because he could have easily just said, hey, I'll take my visit to Washington. It's unofficial anyway, so it's comped anyways. I don't have to pay for it. No, I want to actually prioritize getting up to Washington, being around there. And also, the other thing that was kind of important to mention, there's only, 3 or 4 other significant visitors on campus, right, this past weekend? 2 or 3.
Yeah.
2, 3, 4, whatever you want to say. That means the staff got to focus a lot of attention on him. There's something to be said for big visit weekends, right? We talked at length about that, about the May visits and June visits. But there is also kind of an important note to where, hey, the staff can spend 2 or 3 coaches throughout a day, recruiting, kind of just building those relationships on campus versus, we got 10, 12 kids that we're trying to spread 2 or 3 coaches out with, and we only got 30 minutes with them. It's like, no, you're going to prioritize us. We're going to prioritize you. And to your point, I think he'd be a perfect building block to start out the receiver class.
Oh, absolutely. And that's something where when we look at some of the other just highly touted receivers that are in this class, the 2 that immediately come to mind are like it still feels like a long shot, but Andrew Marsh, the top 75 kid out of Texas who's coming on a visit, Phillip Bell, and Chris Lawson from California. I think if you can land 2 of those 3 guys along with Vines-Bright, that's one of the better receiving classes in the nation. And Kevin Cummings has shown that he can develop these kind of guys. And there's going to be an opportunity for them to make plays next year, depending on, just how the room turns out, with assuming that we know Giles Jackson will leave, and then Jeremiah Hunter as well should be exiting. But he wasn't the only official visitor that the Huskies had this weekend, as SMU tackle Marcus Bryant also took his official visit to Washington. This is a guy that you and I have been talking about since he entered his name in the transfer portal as a graduate transfer. And I just remember as we're kind of looking over, just seeing who's around, we knew he was going to be on campus. And as we were just kind of scanning the crowd, seeing who's around, he stuck out like a sore thumb in a good way, where he is just an absolutely massive prospect. And somebody especially when you and I looked at Drew as a party when we got to talk to him last week, it's, if this guy commits to Washington, their tackles are going to be set. And this is one of the reasons that you and I haven't panicked on the offensive line, is this was one where, it always felt like the Huskies were in a good position to secure his services. And, for whatever reason, if they're able to have these 2 guys as their bookends and then figure it out on the interior with maybe a transfer or 2 more, plus, adding a Garb Memolar or a Landon Hatchett back to the mix, this offensive line goes from a huge question to, I don't want to say one of its greatest strengths, but certainly not an area that the coaching staff is going to be worried about.
Exactly. And I think, and that's the other thing, it was actually kind of unique to see Marcus Bryant standing, let's say 15, 20 yards on to the right, and Drew as a party getting ready to take his practice jersey off. And you kind of just looked, it's like, yeah, this is going to work. This should be fine. And the other thing to think about is, when you're talking about bringing in some transfers, and then you go back and look at their previous thing, kind of body of work and the school that they were at, where did they have success? SMU was 11-3 last year. That offense was cooking, and Marcus Bryant was a big part of that offensive line. And so it's important when you're talking about, okay, it's just a 1 year stopgap, right? It's just we just need a guy that can easily plug and play. And I think it kind of also solves the Drew as a party, not problem, but sort of dilemma that they've been in, where do we put him on the left, do we put him on the right? I think if Washington's able to land Marcus Bryant, Bryant goes left, as a party goes right.
Yep.
And you just call it, and that's not to say that either of them couldn't flip, or let's say, or like if Bryant gets hurt and has to miss a game or has to come out for a series or two, right? Then as the party can kick in, and we've seen what Scott Huff, similar to that, where he would always kind of just rotate those guys on a one-off basis if they needed to.
Sure.
But for the most part, I think you kind of want those guys staying on the right and left side, because as the party's played on the right, I believe he's better on the right. Marcus Bryant's been on the left. He's better on the left. And so it's better to just let those guys cook at their natural positions and try and force them into one position or another.
No, absolutely. And especially when you talk about Drew as a party, where we've seen him play both on the left and the right. And he looks like he can do both. He certainly can. But he looks so much more fluid and natural on the right side, so that if you could bring a Bryant or somebody else out of the transfer portal in to play that left side, it's going to be a whole lot more helpful. And then, Lars, there were also a couple of unofficial visitors. Let's stick on the offensive line here real fast and talk about John Mills, where John Mills is he's a 3-star prospect, but is highly coveted around the country. He's got official visits set to USC, Texas, Nebraska. And he's one of those guys where he also just kind of stuck out like a sore thumb, where he is every inch of 6'6" and 330 pounds. I mean, he's another guy where we could spot him from 50 yards away. Just, that's like, we heard he was going to be on campus. Oh yeah, there he is. That's 100% John Mills. And he's somebody who I like his film a lot. And he needs definitely a year or two development, as most high school offensive linemen do, but he's just such a high ceiling player. And when you factor him in along with Jake Flores, Washington's one commit along the offensive line right now in the 2025 class, that they would certainly be a really nice way to start this class off with, probably going to be 4 takes along the offensive line.
Yeah, exactly. I think that the key part with Flores is that it can be inside or outside, right? So getting John Mills as a pure tackle, I think fair to say pure tackle, right? Again, there's always flexibility, but I think Mills more so than any, because to your point, he looks like a sequoia tree. I know he's from Northern California, right? So again, it's kind of also fitting for the area that he grew up in, right? But no, to your point, it's again, whenever someone hears 3-star, right? It's like, oh, it's a 3-star. It's like, look at the schools that want him. Okay, again, we mentioned a couple of times on the show over the past couple of months where it's not a great offensive line class, but there's kind of a lot of potential and coach and projectability along the offensive line. There's no true like 5-star top end 4-star. There's a couple, right? But similar to the D-line, right? There's a couple, but nothing significant, right? But if you can get John Mills, I think that looking at the way Brendan Carroll has run his offensive line, I think he's a natural fit probably on the left side. But either way, just it allows you to say, okay, there's my tackle, and then you've got Dash Beerley, a quarterback. You're building out your offense is what you're doing. Now, the question is, and probably the other guy that we'll mention, right, is how do you start to build up the defense, right? Because there's no question Jedd Fisch can recruit, and we're seeing all these official visitors get set, but there's no commitments on the defensive side of the ball to this point, which, again, is not bad, right? Because all the interest is there, right? Now, I was going to say, right, not publicly as we were recording at 2:12 or 12:12 on Sunday afternoon. Yeah. Right, 12:11. Right, I guess, because good point. We could see a whoop at any point. But again, Jedd Fisch does not do anything on social media in that regard. So, Jedd, if you could help us out, that'd be fantastic. Again, I'm just going to kind of crowdsource this and just put this out there into the ether. Just any form of something. Just Jedd, just go out to Montlake, go out to Lake Washington, do like a fly fishing thing.
That'd be fantastic. I'd love that.
Have the great Casey Byers capture it on video, and boom, there you go.
Reeling in a big fish. I love that. So boom, you're welcome. Let's talk about Christian Thatcher then for just a minute, who's somebody who I've spoken to at length through the recruiting process. And one of the first things that he told me when we spoke a couple of weeks ago was something that, he's got some crystal balls right now to commit to USC. And one of the first things he told me was, I love the relationship I have with Jedd Fisch's staff so much that I almost committed to him during his time at Arizona. And he told me that he wasn't necessarily super interested in Washington before the coaching change. And now that Jedd Fisch's staff is all up here, that they're very, very, very high on his list. And he's talked a lot about his relationship with Steve Belichick, with Robert Balla, and with Aaron Van Horn, one of the GAs on staff, and just said, yeah, I love talking to all those guys so much. And I've just heard such good things about him. I loved what I've seen from them so much that he's somebody who I would certainly keep an eye on. He is scheduled to come back on an official visit at the end of May. And, you know, Lars, we saw one of Washington's top linebacker targets go off the board and commit to USC in Matai Tagovailoa. But, you know, there's still some fantastic linebacker prospects that are scheduled to take official visits to Washington. Christian Thatcher being one, Zadrius Rainey-Sale being another, and Mark Hennecore from Narbonne in California being a third. And if you can get those three guys in a position where you're losing 4 scholarship linebackers now, with Drew Fowler being added to scholarship, that's a fantastic class right there. And, you know, you can figure out playing time after the fact, but you're going to need to play some of these young guys next year, whether it be Devin Bryant, who we've seen in a walking boot, whether it be Jordan Whitney, whether it be Kamori House, or some of these guys. So Christian Thatcher and some of these other linebackers, if they were to commit to Washington, would have a fantastic opportunity to play next year. And Lars, we're going to keep going with some of our other observations that we had from Saturday's practice. We're going to take a quick break real fast. And we're going to give a shout out to our good friends over at FanDuel because it's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockdown and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and I've got a fun rookie of the year. I know I've talked a lot about Jackson Holiday, you know, love watching him play, but I'm gonna call this the double jack, where parlay Jackson Churio as NL Rookie of the Year and Jackson Holiday for AL Rookie of the Year. I know he hasn't looked great just yet, but parlay that on FanDuel. You know, he probably gets some good odds, and let's see if he can come out a winner on that one. So, Lars, what else did you notice on just during Saturday's practice?
One player that we got to mention is Javon Parker, because again, there was a number of plays where, again, whether it's pass rush, run stuffing, I think it was towards the end of practice, right, where basically Javon looked like 3 players in one and just blew up an entire run play. I believe it was Adam Muhammad. I believe it was Adam Muhammad.
I think it was Jonah Coleman.
Or was it? I was going to say, because that was the only thing I was concerned, because again, either it doesn't matter, and I think that's even more to the point is the fact that it was Jonah Coleman who. There's probably a handful of guys on this team who can tackle him by themselves, right? And Javon Parker is one of them because, again, they both have the same thighs. Like, I think that's where that equals out there, which, again, if you think about that, I'm kind of tongue-in-cheek about that because I think Jonah Coleman has slightly smaller thighs, just a little bit because he's the running back.
But again, it's closer than you think.
And I think that's what's kind of scary is it's a little closer than you think. But Javon's kind of one of those guys where we need to see somebody, whether they get I believe they will get Philip Blady out of the transfer portal. Whether they do or not, whether they add somebody else in the transfer portal along that D-line, he has to pop, right? He's a junior. Yeah. He's been in the rotation since a freshman, really kind of started to emerge more so last season. I believe didn't get the bump we both thought he deserved last season, where, again, yes, you have Tua Taylor and Thule and Bandis, and there was a number of – and MJLA, right? There's kind of there's a logjam of veterans in front of him, right? But I think of that group, wasn't he the best? Like, just pure talent. And I mean, again, maybe
pure talent. Sure. I hear your point. I don't disagree with your point, but Tuli Gasanoa was far and away the most impactful defensive tackle that this team had last season. But one thing that really stood out to me that, we've talked a little bit about it, and I feel like it deserves a little bit more, is just how much we're going to see from Steve Belichick's defense. And I wanted to talk about this a little bit because I wrote about it over on Huskies Wire. You can go check it out. I had a lot of fun with it, where we spoke to Sebastian Valdez after practice on Thursday. And we also spoke to Zach Durfee. And one of the things that Zach Durfee told us is some of the Patriots that they've been watching really closely. And he shouted out defensive tackle Devon Gottschall, defensive lineman Dietrich Wise, linebacker Josh Uche, linebacker Giovanni Tavai, and safety Jabril Peppers. Those are the guys that they've been watching really closely. And so one of the things that I really keyed in on was people who've been kind of playing those roles. And I talked about a little bit earlier on the show, and I swear there's a point here. This isn't just me talking about the Patriots because I can. And I want to talk about Brian Parham because we've seen so much Carson Bruner. We've seen so much of Alfonso Tupatala running with the ones, but I really like what I've seen from Brian Parham so far, where he's got that. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but he's got the size, he's got the speed, where I remember talking to a friend of the show, Camper Michelle, when, we were doing a film study before he committed. And one of the things she said to me was, is he a safety? I was like, no, like he plays linebacker. And the more we talk about his athleticism, the more she was just like, no, I think he can play safety. And I don't disagree. But that was kind of the role that we saw from him on the Denzel Boston fumble that we mentioned earlier, where he was kind of playing that hybrid position where he's a little bit farther back. It almost looked like he was in the middle of a cover three and came up, made a fantastic stop to get the ball out right at the goal line. And he's somebody where, we just talked about Christian Thatcher and, the impact he could make next season if he were to commit to Washington. But we also just need to mention that the impact Brian Parham could make as that LB3, which is what we saw Carson Bruner do last year. And if he's able to play that just somewhat flexible role, I think that he could be an unsung hero of this team moving forward.
No, I don't disagree. I mean, honestly, when I look at Brian Parham, think of a little bit lesser Nick Bolton. That's a deep cut for Washington.
Okay.
One-time commit, ended up going to Missouri. But then again, that's why Bob Gregory liked him, because, again, he is that hitter. He's that guy that can kind of be in not the middle of the defense, but kind of just be that versatile third linebacker, right? That guy that, again, Bolton obviously was more of a 1A. But I think for what Washington – and, again, that's not to say Parham couldn't emerge next to Carson, right?
Sure.
I think there's also kind of a potential where, to your point about Steve Belichick, and it was funny to see Roman as Zach Jeffrey is listing all these names. He's just like – it's just nodding on, and I'm like, okay, I recognize Roman.
Well, hey, in fairness, at the end of that, he looked at me because he saw me and he was like, did I get those numbers right? And I was like, yeah, you did.
Oh, he nailed it perfect. And that was kind of the ironic part. It's like, well, I just kind of focus on the numbers. I don't know the Patriots defense. If Zion was still on this team, he would just go through the Rolodex. I know that. No, I know he is because I talked to him at Pro Day and he's like, man, I do actually think I could have had a 7th year, but I'm ready to try my luck in the NFL. But it's one of those where there's enough I think that's the one thing, whether it's Parham, Dunn, there's a number of guys that have kind of shown it this spring. There's a lot of versatility in this defense where, again, the base remains the same, right? Where it's likely a 4-2-5. Again, they're not going to say that.
So I have a little bit of a conversation I wanted to have with you about the 4-2-5, where that's not necessarily what it's always going to be. Where I was going through a little bit of a deeper film study, I was reading some other articles, and one thing that I'm really intrigued by is that this at times could be a 2-4-5, where I want to see what that looks like, because there's so much flexibility and there's so much fun stuff. And then you look at the personnel groupings, and it's something, again, that I noted in this article over on Huskies Wire, is you could, and it's all going to be situational, but you could go with 2 defensive tackles, 4 linebackers, and then 5 defensive backs. And when I say 4 linebackers, I don't mean 4 Carson Bruner type inside backers, where Carson is going to be playing all over the place. He's going to be playing that Jelani Tavai role where he's inside, he's outside, he'll play corner. He'll not like actually playing corner, but he'll line up in that spot and follow a running back out there in man coverage. He'll do a lot of different things, but you could see 2 like true outside linebackers on the field, but still listed as the linebacker makes it that 2-4-5 in whether it be Lance Holtzclaw, whether it be Isaiah Ward, Russell Davis, where they have that same body type. And one guy who we saw, and it doesn't necessarily fit my argument here, but but it's just something that I still think needs to be noted. One thing that we saw on Saturday was a lot of second team snaps for Lance Holtzclaw along with Jacob Lane, where Jacob Lane is more that true edge rusher where, he'd play a little bit more of the Dietrich Wise role where he can move inside, he can move outside. And because that's what we saw him do last season. And I just really like that pairing a lot, where that would be more like a 3-3-5 kind of look. But just the more that I look at it, the more, exactly as you said, Lars, there's going to be so much versatility. There's going to be so much just movement and confusion that is, while it's, simple when, you listen to Steve or Bill Belichick talk about these sort of things and just say, it's really easy. It's, it sounds really complicated. It looks super complicated, but it's really not. And I feel like we're going to see a whole lot of that this season. And not just as, a Patriots fan and nerd myself, but just as somebody who likes looking at the complexities of some of these different schemes. I think it's going to look a lot like what Michigan's did at times, where I don't know if it's going to have that same level of success, but we're going to see some of those same just schemes and just some of the specifics that they had in there integrated into the Huskies defense as well. My mind just goes to Patriots because that's really what it's going to look like.
No, it's a good point. The only reason I say a 4-2-5 base is because I'm trying to prevent Washington fans from having PTSD from 2021, which is the last time they ran a 2-4-5 defense. If you remember with Bob Gregory and Jimmy Lake.
Oh, I do.
Two down. That's when you said 2 down defensive linemen. I'm like, just be very careful when we're saying 2. We're not talking about literally 2 guys versus a 5 offensive line front, and then 20 guys behind the ball just to prevent getting cooked over the top.
I will say, and I'll probably got to get out of here on this note. We're going to see a lot of that kind of 3-3-5 look with a lot of defensive tackles, where we saw Javon Parker lining up in the 4 with Sebastian Valdez at nose, and then Jacob Bandis was on the other side of him at times, where there were a couple other guys that were lining up in that other, just kind of, it looks like a true 3-4 D end kind of look, but then there's still an outside linebacker on the outside of him. So we're going to see a whole lot of things that look like that. And I'm just really excited to see what it all looks like, because it can be really effective when it's run and executed effectively. And that's one of the reasons I'm so excited about the Steve Belichick hire, because he knows how to make sure it's run and executed effectively. And Lars, with that being said, thank you as always for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We've got so much more fun stuff coming at you from spring practice, from the NFL draft when it gets here. So make sure you stay tuned right here on Locked On Huskies, and make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere, updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. And please leave us a comment down below if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that. If you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it all really does help us out. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Tuesday.